Hi, I'm contractor Steve Roth, and we're going to take a look today at a soffit treatment. What we have is the old treatment right here, very colonial looking, and very, as you can see, worn wood that's been chipping, and it has multiple layers of paint on there. What we want to use is a more maintenance-free product, and Fipon has the architectural trim that's made out of polyurethane foam. Looks much like timber, cedar, but it's an actual foam product, so it's going to be easier to maintain, easier to install, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. Now, this is going to be a very easy build because we're just using what we call flat stock. Flat stock is basically like a wood board. The back of it is solid foam, and the texture of it is unreal. If you look at those heavy lines and everything, it's going to look like a real cedar wood. All right, where we start is we want to put some blocking over this dental trim so we build it out flush, and we've got an easier product to cover that up. I've started it right here. I'm just going to continue that on. We'll just use some blocking material, which could be out of wood, and we're going to secure that to these dental that were here in the past. Okay, now my first build, I'm going to want to do this one underneath to close that off, and like I say, I started here. Pre-cut this to width, and I'll do a dry fit to make sure it's in place. Now, the big secret when you're putting moldings on is make sure you're using construction adhesive when we're fastening that to the sidewall. So we'll add the construction adhesive, the points in contact to the new trim we're putting up. Where the splice is, where we're joining these two together, we want to make sure we're doing what we call a butt cut, and that is where it's a flat cut, not a scarf cut, but just a flat cut, and we're putting adhesive on the end of that material. So basically it's welding the materials together. We call it welding, and we're getting a good bond. That means when there's temperature swing from hot to cold, when it gets cold out and that material shrinks a little bit, it's not going to give us a gap at that seam line. I'm going to want to make sure we're in alignment. That one looks good. Then I'm going to fasten that where I'm in contact with the dentals, the blocking underneath. Now with the second molding going up, I want to show you an important point. When I dry fit this, you're going to notice that that material is oversized and is springing into place. That's very important with polyurethane, because what a general rule is, for every 10 foot of length you have, you want to make sure you're going about a 1/4 inch longer. So if this happened to be 10 foot long, I want to cut the actual molding 10 foot 1/4 of an inch. In other words, you want that molding to spring into place. Seems unusual, but it's a little trick you want to do to make sure when the temperature gets colder and the material starts to shrink, it's got a nice tight seam there that you're not going to get a gap. Along with what we've always talked about is make sure you get your construction adhesive on there. Now you'll see, we'll put this into place. I'm going to spring it. It's going to lay flat. And I'm going to fasten it with fasteners. Polyurethane just tends to lay flat. So as I put the mechanical fasteners in here, you'll see how it flattens out. There you go. That's a good installation right there. Now we're going to put this flat trim on the bottom section here. Here's another thing. I had to do a scribe cut. See how nice that cuts and clean? I actually did that with a coping saw, and it's not like cutting heavy wood. And I had to even tweak it a little bit with a utility knife, so you can get pretty detailed in your scribe cutting by just whittling away and working into that cut area. This will dry fit into there. I'm going into place here. You notice it's a little bit long, and I'm going to spring it. All right, that fits nicely. and back to where the joint is. I tend to like to go into each area both ways, and I'm probably going to put a screw in down here. And then I'll come down here, and I'm going to let that center move out a little bit for me, and I'm going to put a screw in at the end. Here again, that's just adding to that spring tension that we want to make sure we're getting on those moldings. I'll work from the ends and work towards the middle. All right, a couple more builds, and we've got this soffit taken care of. This is a little accent treatment. We're going to do a little scribe that's going to go up against that flat trim. And if you look at the end, where I got it right there, here again, there's how I nicely that scribe cut against those logs right there. Very easy to machine and work with. Probably the biggest difference you're going to notice if you install a lot of cedar trim is getting used to overcutting and springing that into place, because that's not what you do with wood. You're used to just cutting it flush. Great. So on this last trim, I want to show you a little bit of detail. Here, I had to rip that stock to the width I wanted. If you notice, when you rip the material, there's a raw edge of material. And that's fine, but just make sure when you're installing that and it's exposed to the sunlight that you're painting that raw edge. And then if you look at the other side that came with the product, it's molded into place. So you will have a wood texture on both edges. It's only when you have to modify the width and you're cutting it through the saws that you'll get that raw edge. All of a sudden, we've got a 5 build, and that's changed the whole style of this home. But better yet, it's going to be low maintenance. So we won't have to worry about this years down the road. Now you'll notice that there's some glue ooze out that's coming. That's good to have. But the thing you don't want to do is wipe that off. It tends to smear that. I usually let that skin over. It takes about a half an hour. Once that skims over, you can take a putty knife and clean that joint up much easier, and it won't smear the product. Just to wrap it up, you just take a little bit of exterior spackling, fill in those nail heads, because I countersunk them a little bit, clean up those joint lines, and then put a final coat of latex paint on there, and you're finished.